Alright, so now we're going to begin our final compositing process. So I've brought in all of my renders from Clarice into Nuke, and we will use these to put together a cool looking sequence, hopefully. So here I have my DMP base, DMP reflective, and the distant light. And then I have my overpaint of shanties as well as their alpha. And I've rendered a couple of ID passes just for things that I might want to select separately, as well as one that we developed for the gold rooftops of the domes, but I also included it among everything else, and if we want to just use it for the domes later, we can multiply it with the blue channel from this ID. Furthermore, we have our airships, and we have the DMP layer, we have the reflective layer, the depth, as well as the jet engines. In addition, we have our Z depth, our fog VDBs, the DMP rolling mist, and haze, and the God rays as well. And then we have waterfalls. We have 4 sets of waterfalls for the foreground, and 3 for the mid and background. And we have some cables, as well as the depth pass for the cables themselves, and some birds as well. And so let's keep all of these up here, and whenever we need to plug something new in, we can just grab from here. Okay, let's move on. So to start off, let's have a look at our DMP base, and I can see that there might be a slight problem here. If we look here, we are getting some artifacts. Most of the sequence looks okay, and I have no problems with most of it, but I see some flickering here where clearly the projections didn't quite work correctly, and it's a bit of an annoying problem, but I think we can fix it without going back into Clarice, and this is why I'm kind of going over this with you, just in case you have the same problem and you're wondering what to do. Just a quick fix for something like this, and it doesn't work for much more than this, but if you have this exact problem, this might be of help. So let's okay, we don't have an alpha really, so let's create a keyer, and what we want to do is use luminance keying to isolate these little, I guess, fireflies. And if we just key out the shadows, let's see. Okay, maybe something like this. And let's add a grade node. Wait, can I click just G? Yeah, you can add a grade node by just clicking G. You don't need to type it. So here, let's select our alpha. And we're going to increase the gain to make these a little bit brighter. And now let's create an erode fast node, which appears as dilate. And maybe let's just dilate everything by 1. Okay. And now if we just create a quick roto and go to our first frame and let's have a look at selecting these. Okay, and I'm viewing this while selecting here just because it's a little bit... Oh, actually no, I could have just done it in the RGB channel. Either way, we've got this selected, and let's go to shape and set the color to 0 and invert it. And now let's create a transform. And here we're just gonna translate it up by just a few pixels. So we are offsetting where these are. And now if we create a merge node and connect our base as B and our transformed one as A, and we plug in as mask our setup here, and let's just have a look. So now we see that we are using this mask to apply this transformation just to these little spots. And I think we could actually go into our grade and really boost this value up to get rid of sort of last remaining ones. Okay. So that's a quick fix, not perfect, but it'll work. Let's select this. And we're gonna create a backdrop, and we're gonna call it base. Let's pick a slightly different color maybe. Here we go. Right, so now let's add some light. We're just gonna go up and grab our DMP distant layer. Let's make this a little bit smaller maybe. Don't have a lot of room to work with. Maybe I'll zoom in a little bit to compensate. Should be fine. And let's use this as a mask for a grade. So as an alpha for a grade. So we'll just connect this into the mask slot. And see if we try to raise the gain now, it doesn't quite work. Because this doesn't have an alpha. Well, it does, but it's just white. So what we want to do is create a shuffle node and put the alpha into the red channel, or rather maybe the red channel into the alpha. And now it's the same. And so now when we make this brighter, it only happens where the alpha is white. So now we've got some light here. And let's create a quick backdrop. And we'll call this light. And let's also add our reflective layer for the gold. And I'm gonna grab the gold alpha as well. Drop them here. And alright, let's try to first just apply all this reflective look over what we have now from DMP. And let's set this to maybe screen. So we're getting all of these reflections added on top. And while I like some of the effect, I think it looks a little bit too smooth on a lot of them. And here the glare is a little bit too much. So in addition to that, of course, I currently don't want any of these reflections over my actual buildings, just the temples. So let's have a look at the gold alpha. This contains all of the domes kind of nicely selected with our normals from earlier. And let's just bring over this ID as well. And let's just create a shuffle node. And I want to only select the temples, so I want the alpha to be what is blue here. So let me just put all the channels into the blue. And now both the RGB and the alpha are white where the temples are. And if we just merge, mask this, now we have all of the upwards facing angles on the temples. However, I want to only select the domes, so the way I'm going to do this is create a grade. And I'll plug in a roto into the mask and create a reformat with our 4000 by 2000 format. And here in the grade, let's put the gain to 0. And if we now select certain areas of the image, and let's set this to RGBA, and let's invert. So now we only have this. And what I'll want to do is, now that I have a keyframe on the first frame, I'll just go to the last frame and adjust it slightly. And now if I want to bring back some of my other temples, let's look here by pressing 1, and we can do this. And this is a little bit manual, however, seeing as we didn't anticipate splitting this geometry out at the beginning of the project, we'll have to do this quick fix now, and probably takes about the same amount of time, so not too bad. And now we have both of these, and if I change the keyframe slightly here, and again, let's do it here. Okay, and so now we have all of these. Now, keep repeating this technique and cover as many of these elements where you want the reflections as you want. Your scenario might be much different than mine, but this is the solution that I currently have. So let me just copy in my original file here, and I can switch it out with this other one by grabbing it and then clicking Ctrl and Shift and just hovering over and dropping it in. And now we have all of these temple domes selected. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use this as a mask to slightly adjust our lighting render. And if we grab this and click dot here and bring this over, and let's create a clamp. So currently the reason we're getting extreme results with the gold is that this is multiplying with the reflection on the gold and kind of doubling up and becoming very blown out. So instead we can here add a clamp and make its mask just the temple domes. And let's have a look at bringing this down. Okay, so this is original. Let's go. Okay, to maybe this. So now we've eliminated these extremely blown out areas. And now if we go here, this is the only specular highlight layer that we have. However, these are still too smooth, so let's fix them. What I want to do is multiply the alpha of my gold with the values I have in the DMP, because I have a nice little bit of texture here that I could utilize. So let's just again create a keyer from here. And let's have a look. Let's go into the alpha. And let's just find some values that actually work quite nicely. We sort of want this to be quite a sharp, mask on these domes. So something like this I think would work. And let me even maybe sharpen it slightly. Just by a little bit to bring out even more of this texture here. And let's take this and merge these. And we'll set this to mask. So now we are merging our alpha for the temples with our keyed highlights of the DMP, and we're getting something like this. So let's have a look at plugging this in as a mask into this merge. And now we can see that our reflections are much more in line with what we have in our DMP. So that's quite cool. They actually work together instead of against each other. Alright, let's do the same, but just for the water instead now. Let me clean this up a little bit first. Let's make some space. I think it's nice working with just a little bit of space to spread things out. It usually kind of makes everything a little bit easier to follow, I think. So let me just grab this. And here I'm going to create another merge. Again, set the mask. And I'll bring in my reflective layer into B. And into A I'm going to bring in this. But I think first of all we might want to add a shuffle node here and actually put an alpha in, just like we've done previously. And now let's have a look. I think that... Oh, whoops, that wasn't working for a second. I just needed to reload my gold alpha. So actually, maybe let's go to the first frame. Okay. Now let's create a merge. Actually, again, we could just click M to create merge. And create a stencil. And I want to plug it into here. And now we're going to be stenciling out these temples as well. So we've got rid of a lot of that. And also we want to get rid of the trees. We don't want any of this reflective pass on them. So let's grab our other ID pass and bring it here. And let's create another stencil node. And we'll add it there. And now here we want to select the red channel, because that's what our trees are, and let's just put the alpha in there. Okay, so now we've stenciled these out as well. And now let's have a look at recombining these two. So let's take our main render and let's plug in our reflections and we'll set them to screen. So now we have a lot of reflective stuff going on here. We'll want to keep a lot of it, I think. And in fact, we could make this effect a lot stronger. So let's create a grade. And let's lower the gamma somewhat. And we're just gonna up the gain. Okay. And so now that's far too much. Let's maybe turn it down slightly. Okay, and actually maybe let's create a color correct node. And we're going to reduce the saturation a little. And I think I like the reflections on the buildings, but on the water not so much. So maybe let's grab, I guess, yeah, we'll want the red for the water here. So I guess we could first of all just, oops, take this previous shuffle and just plug it in where we needed it. And now I can create another one here and put everything into the red channel. And let's create another color correct here. And we'll plug this in as the mask. And maybe let's just reduce the midtones a little bit. Okay. And also let's reduce the highlights. Yeah, to something like this maybe. Okay, and now let's see. This looks a lot nicer. I think maybe a little bit brighter maybe. And while these reflections are nice, I don't want them in everywhere, so I think instead I'll grab my distant light again. And I'm gonna bring this over as another mask for these reflections. And let's create a dot here and bring this down. And let's create a grade node and a blur. So if I blur by maybe that much, and then what I want to do is in my grade select RGBA, and let's just put up the gain a bit. Maybe let's put it up to 8. And let's now plug this in. Maybe let's clean this up a little bit. Okay. Yeah, so now our reflective areas are concentrated where the light is hitting. It's not necessarily too physically correct, but it adds to the effect and works quite well. Okay. So that'll do for the reflections. And now I think I could also, before we proceed, maybe make the trees a little bit lighter. So let's create a grade. And I'll want to once again grab this. Actually, we could grab it from here where we shuffled the red of the trees out. And so can use this as a mask here. And let's just make them a little bit lighter. Okay. So next up, let's also add our overpaint. And we're just taking this step by step, building it from the very bottom up. And so we have our overpaint here. And what we can do is take this mask from the RGB channels of this render, and we can just create a shuffle copy node. And what we're going to do is copy the red channel into the alpha of that. And let's plug 1 in here and 2 there. And what we're going to do is here put the alpha into the red, and that gets sent to the alpha here in our input 2. So now we have our shanties, and we also have the alpha for them. And now let's, oops, again, I can just click M. Let's merge them over. And what I would like to do is again use my lighting pass to grade these overpaint. And I'm just going to create a grade here, and into the mask I'll plug in my blurred distant light render. And now here, if I increase the gain, we're getting some nice sunlight on those areas. Maybe let's do a little bit less. And so you can see that this adds effect to making for a better sort of composite image, in that the bits that are lit are consistent among our DMP and the CG. And let's just quickly create a backdrop here. Change the color. We'll call this overpaint. Okay. Let's now find our depth pass, and let's just bring it all the way down here. And what we're going to do is merge screen. I keep typing this in. I should be just clicking M, but for some reason I have this habit. So let's plug in the depth there. And just to prep our depth channel, seeing as currently the alpha is just white, let's again shuffle the red into the alpha channel, and that's cool. Let's just grade this fog a little bit. First though, let's just make some space, and okay, G, practice. Okay, so let's maybe put the gain up and then bring down the gamma. I think this is already a lot more successful. That looks a lot nicer. So the one thing I'm unhappy though is how much this background is getting blown out here. So I think I'll just cheat a little bit and clamp out the whitest areas of this if I just go here and change the maximum to something like this maybe. Okay, and now if we look here, we are not getting that extreme amount of fog behind this temple anymore. So it's a little bit of a cheat, but I think we can get away with it. And of course you can switch that level to anywhere you want. So overall this looks alright, but I think maybe we could use a little bit less fog in this area. Even though again it's cheating, I feel like we could bring back some of this detail a little bit. So let's create another grade here by clicking G. And let's look at lowering the gamma a little bit. Okay, and sort of thinking about what kind of level of detail I'd want here in terms of reducing the fog. And let's just create a roto and also reformat that will make our project format. And let's plug these in as the mask.